So thanks everyone for joining Nick and I representing BDH Sterling today as we present to you our session on unlocking your UK pension potential in Australia. So during this session, we're going to be sharing some information and considerations around the types of pensions and transfers, CureOps accounts, the actual transfer process, a bit about BDH Sterling, and a Q&A session at the end. Just to let you know, if you have got questions, if you can put it in the Q&A box, and then we'll get to those at the end of the session. So before we start the full session, I'm just going to go through the general information slide. So just to let you know, this presentation is for information only. Please don't act on anything you might read in this presentation. It's based on our understanding of legislation in both Australia and the UK as of today's date, the 24th of November, and is subject to change. The value of your investment can go down as well as up, and you may not get back the full amount you invested. Past performance is not a reliable indicator of future performance. Your pension income can also be affected by interest rates at the time you take your benefits. Levels based on release from taxation may be subject to change, and their value depends on the individual circumstances of the investor. This isn't tailored advice, so please do seek financial advice if you're wanting any further information on this. Today's presenters, myself, I'm Gemma. I'm one of the Australian qualified financial planners at BDH Sterling, despite being from the UK. I've been in Australia now for 13 years and been with BDH Sterling for almost 3 years now. We've got Nick Bond, who's going to be running us through most of the presentation today. Nick's been with BDH Sterling, I think, almost since inception of the company. He's very knowledgeable in the area of the pension transfers, and he's provided advice both in the UK and Australia. So he's got a wealth of experience and knowledge in this area. He's got the tough job today of guiding us through the main content and going through the topics that we've just discussed there. We have broken down the content today into the following sections. So as I briefly mentioned earlier, so we're going to be covering off the types of pensions, ones that you can and can't transfer, and the main reasons why you transfer, the options for how to do the transfers, and if you are under 55 and over 55, what options available to you, the CureOps accounts and your obligations with those. How the actual transfer process works, that's broken down just to talk you through bullet point how you actually go ahead with the transfer if you're looking to do that, and a little bit about BDH Sterling and why you would use us to help with the transfer. And then, as I said, we'll do a Q&A at the end for any questions that do arise from the session today. So I will now hand over to Nick, who's going to take us through the main presentation.
Thanks, Gemma. Welcome, everybody, and appreciate you taking the time out your day to join us. So I'll now jump on to section 1. So what types of pensions are there, and why would you consider transferring them? So the types of UK pensions, broadly speaking, are defined contributions or money purchase schemes, as you might be more familiar with that terminology, or defined benefit and final salary schemes. So a defined contribution scheme is largely made up by contributions from the member or employer. You have a choice of how that money is invested, and when you pay into that UK pension scheme, or when you paid in, you would have received tax relief from the UK government for making savings into a UK pension. There are a lump sum option and flexible income options when you're able to draw your pension, which is at age 55 currently. That is increasing to age 57 in the not too distant future. So that broadly covers defined contribution schemes, quite similar to Australian superannuation funds. Defined benefit schemes work a bit differently. So the employer provides a fund for you, and the employer manages that scheme and bears that investment risk. So they're responsible for taking care of your money. They will give you a guaranteed income for life, and that is normally indexed in line with inflation, and there's also normally a spouse's pension. The split is typically 50%, but can be greater than that, depending on what type of scheme it is. Excuse me. Then your pension income will be based on the salary that you were earning during your career. Normally, well, it depends on the scheme. Sometimes it's at the end of your tenure, what your salary was at the end, based on the length of service, and there's accrual rates internally within the scheme. What you can do to find out what that pension income is worth is you can ask the scheme to provide a cash equivalent transfer value, so a lump sum value in exchange for that pension income that you're entitled to, and that cash equivalent transfer value is guaranteed for 3 months. If you wish to transfer out of a defined benefit scheme, if the valuation, that CETV, is over £30,000, then you must have advice from an FCA licensed advisor with the relevant permissions to provide defined benefit advice. Okay, so what types of pensions can be transferred? Defined contribution schemes or money purchase schemes, private defined benefit schemes, final salary schemes, public sector funded defined benefit schemes. So there's only a couple of those remaining. One of those, for example, is a local government pension scheme. And if any of you have historically transferred out to a QROPS in another jurisdiction, they can be transferred as well to Australia. So what can't be transferred? The UK state pension, that you'll have an entitlement to that if you met the number of qualifying years. That can't be drawn out as a lump sum. That will just be income that will be paid to you year on year from the UK government. Public sector unfunded schemes, so defined benefit schemes like the NHS, civil service, fire service, police, armed forces, etc. They cannot be, they cannot be transferred, unfortunately. And any defined benefit schemes that are in the pension protection fund. So if a scheme ran into financial difficulty, it could have been moved into the pension protection fund. Once it's in there, you can't transfer that out. It's secured, it's run by the government. Excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat. But yes, you can no longer transfer the full amount. And also any annuities that are already in payment. So if you started an annuity, much like if you started a defined benefit income stream, you can't transfer out. Excuse me. Australian QROP superannuation. So in order to be able to transfer a UK pension across, you're going to need to have a QROPS fund. But what does that mean? I'm sorry, I'm going to have to take a swig of water. Apologies. Sorry, I've got a frog in my throat. Sorry, let me try and clear it. Okay, so yeah, a QROPS scheme, you need that to be able to transfer over to Australian Super. The scheme must meet HMRC requirements. So the UK call the shots on the rules with regard to QROPS. Broadly speaking, there must be no better benefits than a UK pension can provide you with. That QROPS fund will be allowed to receive the UK pensions. And it was designed for people with UK pensions that are living overseas permanently. So it's designed to make transfers easier and people be able to access their pension in the country that they're residing in. If the transfer is done incorrectly and it's not an approved transfer, there can be a 25% tax charge on that transfer. In Australia, there are only two options for QROPs. One is a self-managed super fund, a SMSF. The other, there is a retail scheme that anyone over the age of 55 is eligible to join. If you have a QROPS, there are reporting obligations. The retail scheme will take care of those ongoing reporting obligations. But if you have a self-managed super fund, you will be responsible for making sure that the SMSF reports to HMRC, and those obligations, depending on your situation, depending on timing of the transfer, can carry on for 5 to 10 years. So why may transferring a UK pension not be suitable or not be in your best interest? So with defined benefit schemes, they're very closely guarded because they're very valuable pension schemes. So the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK has directed that a defined benefit scheme, when you're analysis, the assumption is that you shouldn't transfer out, and you need to be able to build a case based on the individual circumstances as to why it may be in their best interest to do so. If you do transfer out, you will lose the guaranteed income. So that guaranteed income, which rises in line with inflation, will be gone. So something to be very wary of. And also the individuals, if they don't like investment risk and they want the surety of an income, they wouldn't want to be taking money out of a guaranteed environment and then having money themselves and have that money at risk themselves. You'll have a loss of protections that the UK provides, like the Pension Protection Fund and the Financial Services Compensation Scheme. Depending on the value of the fund as well, it's not always cost effective or tax effective, and also depending on how long an individual has been in Australia whilst having that UK pension and haven't transferred it. In the past, there's been people that have been scammed and it's cost them a lot of money, so need to be very careful of that. Overall, and probably most importantly, the suitability of that transfer will really depend on what individual circumstances there are. So it's based on a number of things. Is there a spouse? Are they in good health? What's the overall asset position? Is there any other guaranteed income? There's a number of things that need to be considered when looking at transferring a pension. And if those boxes aren't ticked, then it might not be in the individual's best interest to move that across. Okay, I think did I skip a slide there? Let me just check. Sorry. Right, yeah, why consider transferring? So one of the important things is mitigating currency risk, particularly when you're in retirement. Looking at this graph here, you can see how much that has fluctuated over a 10-year period. Speaking personally from personal experience, I moved over when the exchange rate was £1 buying $1.45, and in the time that I've been in Australia, I've seen it go from $1.45 up to $2.20. So there is a broad spectrum of what the exchange rate will bring. So we believe in taking that long-term currency risk out. Okay, what else? Simplification. You might have a number of UK pensions. You might just have one, but it's going to be a lot easier to deal with a super fund in your time zone than it is dealing with a UK pension for many years. Yeah, when you want to come to withdrawing money and lump sums and income, it's much simpler to have that in Australia than in the UK. You will be able to gain control of investments. Look, you can do that in a defined contribution scheme or money purchase scheme in the UK, but you'll be closer to the you'll be closer to the fund. You'll be able to take more of an active interest in it. Tax efficiency, and I'll come on to that in a bit more detail, but it's much more tax efficient to be transferring your pension, or in most circumstances, I should say, more tax efficient to transfer your pension to superannuation and draw it from super. You'll eventually move out of the UK rules and HMRC remit, and it's often better for estate planning purposes as well. Superannuation, depending on the types of components you got in super, but can be quite more generous than passing on benefits from a UK pension fund. Okay, so just to give you a bit of a flavour of changes that occur, we've seen a number of them over the years, but these are recent or fairly recent changes. In November 2021, pension trustees had to increase their due diligence to avoid people getting scammed and avoid transfers going awry. So it is a lot more stringent now on from the trustees on transferring out. It does take quite a bit of time. There is also a money helper call that some of you or a lot of you will probably have to do if you do transfer your pensions. It's a government agency that essentially is sense checking or checking your knowledge that you're not just doing this blindly, you have been advised properly and you're not getting scammed. So that was a pretty good thing to bring in. However, it does slow things up quite considerably because you have to book in for an appointment with that UK agency. In April 2024, the lifetime allowance was abolished, and then that was replaced with 3 different tests: the overseas transfer allowance, lump sum allowance, and lump sum death benefit allowance. In 2025, they no longer allowed you to apply for lifetime allowance. There were no new applicants, so that has now finished. And the UK domicile rules were replaced by the statutory residency test. So these things all affect pension transfers. Proposed changes. So you'll probably, a lot of you be aware of UK pension funds being brought into the realms of inheritance tax. So that is anything unused will be taxed at 40% if you're over and above the lifetime inheritance tax threshold. In April 2028, as I mentioned before, the age to access your UK pension is increasing to 57 from 55. And that therefore means that in order to be able to transfer, in order to set up a QROPS, an individual is now going to need to, or from April 2028, going to need to be 57. Okay, so let's get into the taxation a bit and what the options are for drawing income for the UK pension scheme. So if you draw down from that UK fund, the income is taxable in Australia. So if you're a permanent resident or citizen and tax resident of Australia, if you're drawing from a UK pension fund, that income will be assessable by the ATO. There is a double taxation agreement in place, so you won't get taxed twice. It won't get taxed in the UK if you complete the relevant paperwork to get it paid gross. You can have what is called a UPP, undeducted purchase price allowance, which essentially is any contributions that you made into a defined benefit scheme can reduce the taxable taxable amount of income. Lump sums from UK pension, the 25% you can take tax-free in the UK. But unfortunately, that is taxable in Australia. And generally speaking, it will be based on the growth in the values of the fund since you became an Australian resident. So tax-free in the UK, the lump sum, but certainly not in Australia. Okay. So what happens when we transfer? The downside of a transfer, or one of the downsides, is the applicable fund earnings of the fund are taxed at 15%. So whatever the value of the fund was when you arrived in Australia, compared to the fund value when you transfer it, that is called the applicable fund earnings and is taxed at 15% when it arrives in Australia by the ATO. The remaining balance is transferred tax-free. So your value when you arrived, that will all come over tax-free, but it is subject to non-concessional contribution cap limits. And depending on the size of the fund, you may have to split that up and bring it in over multiple years because because of the non-concessional caps. You can also draw lump sums from the UK pension scheme. We do use that strategy sometimes to reduce the fund value and help get more money over to Australia quicker. That wouldn't actually go into the QOPS fund, but can be paid to you personally. Okay, so on to section 2 now. I'm just trying to be wary of time, so we've got time for questions, so I'll try and power through. Right, what are the transfer options? Someone aged under 55, that person can't transfer, and as I said, it'll be in 2028, it'll be 57. But they do have options within the UK. So you could consolidate, if you have multiple schemes, you could consolidate into a SIP or another private pension. Or you can leave it where it is in the current scheme. Using a SIP is quite an attractive option because that's likely how the transfer will take place when you are of age to be able to do it. And there's also multi-currency options. So you'll be able to buy Australian dollars and invest in Australian dollars in that SIP and hold it there until you're of age to be able to transfer it across. So what is a SIP? It's a personal pension scheme that gives individuals a lot of control over what they want to invest in, hence the name, self-invested personal pension. And it's quite similar to an SMSF in Australia. So the benefits, as I mentioned before, you can have GBP or AUD, and you can invest that. If you do trade the currency, you can invest it in Aussie dollars. 100% of your pension passes to beneficiaries, should you pass away pre-age 75. And you can have as much or as little input into the investment as you want inside of that SIP. It does give you a lot of flexibility. So case study for someone under the age of 55. John's got 2 company pension schemes, totaling $350,000 that he would like to transfer to Australia. So he would consolidate those 2 into a SIP or a personal pension, and invest the funds in the UK. We would probably suggest in Aussie dollars. And then at age 55, we would help John to set up a QOPS fund in Australia to receive that UK pension transfer. He's under the threshold of the non-concessional caps, so he would be able to get all of that across in one go. So what are the options for over 55? So the recommendation might be to retain the UK benefits, particularly if it's a defined benefit scheme, or transfer to an Australian QOPS fund. And we'll run through a quick case study. So Janet is 60. She's got a DB scheme with a transfer value of $740,000 Janet would like to move the fund to Australia as soon as possible and access some funds to repay her mortgage. So because her value is over the non-concessional limit, we would certainly move that out of the defined benefit scheme, because we're going to need to break that fund up because she's over the NCC limit, and also be able to buy the dollars pre-transfer. We would set up a scheme straight away for Janet, for Janet to be able to receive her first transfer. And then, depending on what her applicable fund earnings are, she may leave some or a chunk of that 740 behind. Then, when the money's in Australia, if she has met the condition of release in Australia, she will be able to draw that money that she's transferred over from her QROP super fund straight away, if that is what she wishes to do. There is no time limit on when you can access that money post-transfer. There's just time limits on how long it must stay within a QROPS fund. And then if she's paid off all her mortgage, we can help her invest the remaining balance if she requires that assistance. Okay, so a bit of detail now on QROPS. So what is a QROPS? The Q has actually been dropped, but we keep it in there because that's what most people are familiar with. It's actually, ROPS now, but QROPS is Qualifying Recognised Overseas Pension Scheme. They were introduced in April 2006. And it's an overseas pension scheme, not just in Australia, but around the world in various jurisdictions that meet criteria that HMRC have put in place, and therefore they are able to receive UK pension transfers, QROPS funds. And it's an option for, as I said before, people who've left the UK permanently and are retiring abroad. It's often a much more convenient and sometimes tax efficient way of being able to draw down from your UK retirement provision. Legislation changes. We've seen a fair bit over the years, but I'll give you the headline pieces. So before April 2015, you could transfer out of NHS and police, etc. But the UK government changed that and put a ban on unfunded public sector schemes. The HMRC also introduced the age pension test, and as a result of that, all the former QROPS. Sorry, we jumped to a slide there, did we? As a result of that, all the former QROPS funds in Australia were removed from the QROPS list because they could no longer meet the criteria. And the FCA also brought in the requirement for advice for defined benefit schemes when that value, the CTV, is over £30,000. So quite a few changes in 2015. In 2017, they made a sweeping change pretty much overnight, whereby if you used to be able to transfer to a jurisdiction, QROPS jurisdiction that you didn't reside in, but if you do that, for example, you could have moved it to New Zealand or Gibraltar or wherever. You can't do that now, or you can, but you get hit with a 25% tax charge if you transfer your UK pension to a jurisdiction that you don't reside in. And contribution caps were reduced in Australia quite considerably. They've started creeping back up now, but they dropped quite a bit back in 2017. Okay, so what are the benefits of a QROPS fund? Your pensions in the country that you're living in. It's going to be easier for you to keep an eye on and draw down from. Your pension can be denominated in GBP or AUD, depending on what your needs are. 100% of that pension can pass to your dependents if you pass away. And often the tax treatment is better in that QROPS. Certainly in Australia, it's normally better than the UK pension fund that drawing down from. And you can then have all of your retirement provisions in one place. You can probably consolidate QROPS and non-QROPS in the future, and have all your retirement benefits under one structure, which will make life a lot easier, particularly the older one gets. What are the responsibilities of the QROPS funds? So the scheme has a responsibility to report to HMRC for 10 years from the date of the transfer. There's certain criteria that if it's met, must be reported to HMRC. That scheme is also must also make sure that the benefits that you get from your QROPS scheme are broadly in line with the UK pension fund. And the best example I can give you of that is, for example, the UK SIPs. You're not allowed to invest in residential property, but in an SMSF you are. So you can't invest in a residential property in a QROPS SMSF because it's got to meet the UK structure for that period of time whilst it's a QROPS. And you must comply, or the QROPS fund must comply with the member payment provision period. So these are all things that the QROPS must adhere to. Right, what is the process? So what one would do if you're interested and have got a UK pension and want to talk it through further is you can meet with us or me or one of my colleagues for an initial consultation to determine whether or not we are able to assist you or not, and that is at no charge. If we are able to assist and if you wish to engage our services, then you'll be introduced to one of our financial planners that will be able to go through your goals and objectives, understand your situation, so that we can then write our pension transfer analysis report, and often in tandem a statement of advice in Australia. Within that pension transfer report, we will then make our recommendation of whether we think you should retain your UK pension funds or whether we think you should transfer the benefits over to a QROPS scheme. And then we can also, if you like the recommendations and wish to follow those, we can also implement those recommendations for you and do all the paper pushing and help you with the money helper calls and getting it all organised throughout that period. So why should you seek advice before you transfer? Look, there are lots of changes, and people might read stuff online that was right or correct a few years ago that may not have been updated and it may not be correct today. So you're up against two different pieces of or jurisdictions legislation. So you've got the UK to contend with and the Australian legislation to contend with. If you do it wrong, there can be harsh penalties of up to 55% that HMRC can apply if you get that transfer done incorrectly. And also we can confirm whether you can transfer or not. For example, obviously NHS and etc. I've confirmed they can't be done, but there are some other nuances, and we can look at whether or not certain types of funds can or have the ability to be able to be transferred. For example, if you're within 12 months of your normal retirement age and you've got a defined benefit scheme, you don't have the statutory right to transfer out. The trustees will often let you, but you don't have the statutory right to request a transfer out. Okay. This is over to you, Gemma, I think, isn't it?
Right, I am still here.
Yeah.
So why would you choose BDH Sterling to do the transfer? We are chartered in the UK, and I guess one of our unique points is that we have dual licensed advisors in both jurisdictions. So in the Australian offices, we've got advisors who are qualified on the UK and Australian side, and again in the UK as well. And you know, we all sit side by side, so can help each other discuss the cases and use sort of that wealth of knowledge that we've got to get the best solution for you. We do have a few advisors here who are qualified with giving advice on the defined benefit scheme. So there, as Nick said, anything over £30,000 you have to get advice on. So we have the people here who are able to give that to you. We've got 16 plus years of experience in doing this. And again, as Nick said, there's so many changes. Obviously, we've got the budget in the UK today, so we're waiting to see what comes from that. And any changes that occur, you know, we are then ready to speak to our clients about it and help them and what that means for them, and change strategies if we need to. The advice is in-house, both in Australia and the UK. So we do work closely together with our London office as well. And we are highly rated on both Google and Trustpilot. And once the funds come over to Australia, or if you're under 55 and they're staying in the UK, we're able to provide other financial advice as well. We don't just do the UK pension, so we can take into account the rest of your situation and give you really holistic financial advice. And for anyone moving to Australia, the financial system here is new to you. Obviously, we can let you know other things that you can do here to be more tax effective, to save for your retirement, and just help you out with further strategies as well as just the UK pension. If you did want to speak to anyone, please obviously do get in contact on the email address there. And as Nick said, that would just be then an initial consultation with someone to see if we can help you, talk through initial fees and what the strategies would sort of look like. So we will go to the Q&A section now. There were quite a few questions that were coming through. So I'll give Nick a little bit of a break and I'll see if I can answer any on the Australian side. And then I will hand back to Nick if there's any UK ones. Okay, so Nick might be able to help out on this one a bit, but we've got a question. When I've tried previously to contact a financial advisor, they've run a mile because I don't have a huge sum, either here or in the UK, to deal with and get instantly dismissed. Do you have a minimum amount that you would deal with?
Yeah, let me take that one, Gemma. Yeah, look, with the tax involved and the cost of the advice, yeah, there is a minimum really for the individual for it to make it, for it to be worthwhile. And really the bottom line, if it's a pension transfer, is about £75,000. If your fund is below that, we could look at withdrawal reports, so keeping it in the UK and drawing down on it. But again, there's still a reasonable fee involved in that. So I would say the minimum for a withdrawal report would need to be about £50,000. So yeah, hopefully that gives you an idea.
Thanks, Nick. All right, I'll try and pick some Australian ones now. So on a previous slide, you indicated a lump sum could be withdrawn to pay down a mortgage. What, if any, are the tax implications of this? So once you've got two options there. If you're taking the 25% lump sum from the UK, that goes into your bank account, not a CureOps account. So that's there for you to use to pay off your mortgage if you want to. The tax implications on that depend if there's any growth element that you've brought across personally, or whether all the growth has been captured in the pension transfer. So there may be some tax to pay on the transfer of that, but then on using that for your mortgage, there's no tax implications. If the funds have gone into your CureOps super, or your self-managed or your retail fund, and you want to draw down a lump sum to use to pay off your mortgage, if you are over 60 and you've met a full condition of release, it's the same as if you were drawing from any standard super in Australia. So there's no tax to pay. And that goes back to one of the reasons why you would move it to Australia, because once you're in that drawdown phase, you're in a 0% tax environment. So there'd be no tax to pay on any capital gains that you're releasing from selling down investments, and there's no tax to pay personally on the income from that. That's all tax free. Same person's asked if you said probably consolidate cure-ops and non-cure-ops. Assume this is after 5 years. Yes and no, depends on the route you go. If you open a cure-op self-managed super fund, you can immediately transfer any existing Australian super into that cure-op self-managed super fund. So you can consolidate from day one. You can't do it the other way. You can't move out into a retail fund until after that 5-year period. So if you are happy with the self-managed and moving your existing funds into it, you can consolidate that way. But you're right, you have to wait 5 full UK financial years to be able to roll from a cure-ops fund into a standard retail fund. There are some ways we can use different contribution limits to potentially do withdrawals and recontributions before that 5-year period. We won't sort of go into detail on that in this. So there are other ways that we can look at it, but technically that's probably the 2 ways. And what do I need to have ready to attend a meeting with an advisor? So to start the process, you would have an initial call with most likely Nick. If you have any details on your existing UK pensions, obviously the more you have, the easier it is for Nick to be able to give you a good idea of what we can do and what the costs will be. After you've had the conversation, we do send out sort of all of our initial documents to you to complete. So that's things like our fact find and then third-party authorities to get the research on your UK pension. So don't feel that you have to have everything before you make that first step. It's all part of the process, but I guess you'll just get more value from your first meeting if you've sort of got an idea of what pensions you've got in the UK. Don't know if you want to add anything else to that, Nick.
No, that's great.
Yeah. Okay. What age can I access my Australian cure-ops in an SMSF, and can I take a variable income plus lump sums if required? Possibly covered that off in the last question, but yep, once the funds are in a cure-ops super in Australia, apart from the cure-ops rules where you're not allowed to roll it to a non-cure-ops funds, access is the same as a retail fund or another super fund in Australia. So once you meet a partial condition of release, so that could be 60 and still working, you can take a transition to retirement pension, whereby you can take up to 10% of the balance each financial year. And once you meet that full condition of release, so either 65 or you quit work between 60 and 65, then you can access up to the full amount. And again, that's tax-free. So I guess one of the differences between the super here and how a lot of the funds are structured in the UK is you do have that variable access. So most clients would set up a minimum drawdown that they'll receive monthly. So just to sort of replace their earned income. So they've got that regular amount going in each month. But if at any point you need 30,000 to pay for a flight back to the UK or to buy a new car, you can absolutely take a lump sum as well. So yeah, that's completely variable. Can you transfer your tax-free lump sum from the NHS pension straight into a pension fund here and not have to pay Australian tax on it? So I'm assuming that's meaning taking that 25% sort of PCLS out. So it wouldn't go straight into a pension here. If you took the 25% lump sum out, it would just be paid into your bank account. But then if you have contribution limits available to you in Australia, either your concessionals or non-concessionals, you could elect to put that into super so that it's in a more tax effective environment here. That wouldn't mitigate you having to pay the Australian tax on the transfer of it, but it would just mean those funds are then in the more tax effective super environment for the rest of your retirement, instead of earning money in your own name and then paying a marginal tax rate on the returns. If I already have an Australian fund, not sure if it's cure-ops or not, can I transfer to this? No is the answer to that, and it's very unlikely it is a cure-ops fund if you've just set up a super fund here, because there is only one retail fund in Australia that's a cure-ops. So yeah, unfortunately you can't transfer into that. It does have to be into the cure-ops fund after they've made the changes there. Is there a minimum amount to set up a cure-ops in Australia? No, that would just again go back to Nick's earlier response of the fees involved and weighing up whether it's then worth you doing it. I have a pension which combines a defined benefit element as well as a defined contribution scheme. Can I transfer the defined contribution portion, leaving the defined benefit in the UK? Nick, can you confirm that one for me?
I'm just rereading. Sorry. Yeah, you can transfer the defined contribution part of it. So if it's a hybrid scheme, it might be a bit more complicated. But if it's a totally separate scheme where one is defined benefit and one is defined contribution, then yes, you can absolutely transfer the defined contribution part and leave the defined benefit in the UK if that's what you wish to do. So yes, I'll jump on the next couple, Gemma, to give you a break.
All right, into the Q&A ones as well.
Yeah. So number of qualifying years for the minimum is 10 you must have to get something, and 35 years to get the maximum. So you'll be able to check that on mygov.uk. Is UPP effectively AVCs? No, AVCs are additional voluntary contributions that you would have made when you had had the defined benefit scheme working for that employer. UPP is an undeducted purchase price calculation, which effectively will give you a portion of that defined benefit pension income tax-free. So it's the member contributions that we're calculating, and how much of that can be paid back out tax-free to you. So no, it's not the same as AVCs. Okay, shall I move on to the Q&A now, Gemma?
Yeah.
The ones in the Q&A bit.
Yeah.
All right, I'll start from the top. Can we please access the recording after this webinar? Yes, that will be sent out to you. So yes, you will be able to have access to that. ASF is Australia's only retail super fund that is listed as a QROPS. What alternatives are there to transfer a UK private fund into other than an SMSF? If your private UK pension fund confirms that they can pay the amount into an Australian bank account, could you instead transfer to a Wise account, given the fund the UK bank details? Also, if you've retired in that year and received the funds, what tax implications would there be? So you can get your fund paid into a UK. I'll start from the beginning. That is the only retail QROPS fund available, as we mentioned. You could ASF. You could get your pension paid into your bank account, and you can convert it with Wise, and then bring the money over to Australia. But yes, the tax implications will be that it will be classed as income in the tax year that you draw it, and it will be assessed in line with marginal tax rates in Australia. So if you've got a large fund, it's probably something you wouldn't want to do. If you've got a smaller fund, like I mentioned, sort of under that 50,000, you might want to do that potentially, and potentially even over a few years. So yes, that income does need to be lodged on your tax return. One of the retail super funds went bust recently. What risk is there? It's the money secure with super funds. Every super fund has a risk of failing, but the money's held in trust, so your money is safe. It will just depend on what investment that you have within that fund. That's where your money is at risk. But the actual money that they hold on behalf of you is all held in trust. So it's what you invest in that you need to be cautious of. So I couldn't answer that question about what the chances of the retail scheme going bust are. Hopefully minimal, but never say never.
Should I do the next one?
Yeah.
So the 15% tax on the transfer to Australia, so that's just on the growth portion. You pay 15% tax on the growth. So the way that we look at that is what the value was when you arrived in Australia, and whatever that value is, say it was $300,000 you had there, you don't pay any tax on that portion that comes across. If it's then grown to 400,000, you pay 15% tax on that 100,000. So it's only on the growth portion since you left. So understand that is taking a chunk out of the fund initially, but once it's in Australia, Whilst you're in accumulation phase, any growth or earnings on it is paying tax within the fund at 15%. And once you're in pension phase, it's 0%. So all of the growth in earnings you're paying no tax on, and the income is then drawn out. You don't pay any tax on that. If you were to leave it in the UK and draw the income was taxable in Australia at marginal tax rates for the rest of your retirement. So you're taking that small upfront tax hit to have tax-free income for the rest of your retirement. What factors influence a transfer not being approved? So that would be in terms of the defined benefit not coming across. I understand it, Nick.
Yeah. Do you want me to do that, or you
yeah,
want to take
you go
it?
on that
one. So look, there are a number of factors. The biggest one, or one of the biggest ones, is probably what the value is in comparison to the pension income. So to give you a couple of extreme examples, if your pension income is £10,000 a year, and you're offered a transfer value of £100,000, that's clearly not a fantastic transfer value that you've been offered, because excluding inflation, that's only 10 years worth of pension income. If you got 10,000 year pension and you're offered £300,000, that's a bit more attractive and appealing. And given the friendly tax environment in Australia, that may be conducive to a yes for a transfer. So one of the biggest things is what is that transfer value, and the other things around that are what's your current asset position? Do you own your own home? Do you have debt? Do you have money in superannuation? Do you have any other guaranteed income like the UK state pension? Will you get an entitlement to age pension? Will having that defined benefit scheme affect the age pension? Do you have children? So that it's very broad. What we look at, and as I said before, the starting point is no from the FCA, and we're trying to use your entire situation. That's why we need a lot of information from you to determine if that transfer is going to be in your best interest.
Note the QROPS is for any UK pension transfers. It's not just the DB scheme. So anything that's coming across from the UK has to go into a QROPS fund. What is the retail scheme for QROPS? That is Australian Expatriate Superannuation Fund. All my friends were advised to retain and do not transfer in the PTI. If the advice is do not transfer, can I still transfer out?
Yes, you can. We will not help implement that transfer, because we will not help an individual do something that we don't believe is in their best interest. But we will sign the necessary paperwork to say we provided you with the advice, which is what is required under legislation. However, some schemes, not that many, but some schemes also have taken taken it to another level, and they have insisted that the advice must be positive to transfer in order for them to release the funds. So you would need to check that if you were going to transfer it, regardless of what our advice was to do so. So our short answer is yes, you can, but we won't help you implement that. And yes, we can email the slides through. That's the next question. What are your charges? Flat fee or percentage of the transfer value? We charge flat fees based on the work that we're doing. So there's a fee for the pension transfer report. There's a fee for the implementation of the advice, and fee for transferring tranches across to Australia. But it is all a flat fee, not percentage based. Hence why the lower balances can be somewhat cost prohibitive, because we are a flat fee. But for those with larger funds, our fee structure is quite attractive. Can UK crystallised pension, so after the tax-free cash has been taken, be transferred to Australia? Yes, it can, but it depends on the balance of the fund, or I'll rephrase that. It depends on what the non-concessional component would be. So if your non-concessional limit is, sorry, if your fund is over the non-concessional limit, which is $360,000, you can't make partial transfers from a crystallized fund. So if it's over that 360 limit, the answer is no. However, there is one pension scheme in the UK that can do this. So short answer is no, but long answer is yes. We can help you if you crystallise that pension fund and can help get that transfer across.
I'll take the next one. I think that's if you are already receiving pension income into the UK, should you keep it going into a UK account or bring it to Australia? It's really personal preference, but I would usually say for it to go into the UK so that you're in control of that exchange rate. If it comes straight to Australia, you get whatever rate there is on the day. So if you have it in the UK and transfer it yourself, you can wait and make that decision on the exchange rate. If you're also going to be traveling back to the UK, you can keep some there for when you're there, so you're not transferring back and forth. The only thing I would say, if you are about to move, there are some banks that close down your accounts once you are an Australian resident. I don't know if I can name banks on here, so I might not. But just check with your bank if they will allow you to retain your account once you're in Australia. And if they won't, I would advise trying to open another account, or like someone else mentioned earlier, having a Wise account, just so that you can still have an account in the UK, because some clients have come unstuck where they've moved here. Their account subsequently has been closed. It's been very difficult to open a new one once they're here. So just have a look into that before you move. That's all I'd say on that one. Is UK state pension taxed? Yes, it is. So the UK state pension can be a great base for your income here, especially if we have couples who are both getting the full UK state pension. Then it gives you a really good base of income before you start drawing down in your own assets. But on the flip side of that, if you have got the full UK state, that's going to take up most of your zero rate tax allowance in Australia. So then any other income you're earning over and above that, you're going to be taxed on. So that's why you then want to be trying to get as much of your other assets into super as possible, so that you're paying 0% on those assets. Thank you, Gemma. You're welcome. I'm sure that was for you as well, Nick. I think that's all the questions that have come through on the Q&A, and that does take us to almost 5 o'clock in Perth, and an hour later than we started for everyone else. So I think we will wrap it up there. You have got our details on email, so please do feel free to send through any questions if they arise after this, and as you said, make a sort of obligation-free appointment to speak with Nick or one of the other advisors if you're thinking of getting some more personal advice. We just want to thank everyone for taking the time out of their day, wherever you are, to join us. We hope that it has been useful and answered some burning questions you might have, and maybe sort of getting you started on this process. I know a couple of people have asked, but yep, a recording will be sent through to everyone, and we can send the slides through as well, so you've got that for your information afterwards. And we will also send out a feedback survey if you have got the time, just to respond to that. It just helps us to improve the sessions for the future. And yeah, just please do get in contact on the email address if you've got any further questions after this. We look forward to working with some of you in the future. So thanks, Nick. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks.